A true king, though, he does what he believes is right. Where does this start? It starts within each and every one of us.
Welcome to Prism of Torah with Rebbe Saf Aaron Prisman, engaging Divrei Torah, packed with stories and practical insights. Find us wherever you get your podcasts or at prismoftorah.org.
Shalom uvracha. This week's Parshas Vayigash. First episode, coming off of the climax episode in the end of last week's Parsha, where Binyamin is taken away from the brothers by Yosef after he hid the Kiddush cup in his bag. And now Yehuda's confronting him and is telling him the whole story. Look what you did. You forced us to bring Binyamin with us, even though our father didn't want to. And now you're taking him away from us. Take me instead. And at that point, Yosef couldn't withstand embarrassing his brothers, and he told them who he was, etc., etc. However, it's interesting to note, the Midrash Rabbah says on this pasuk, based on the pasuk in Tehillim, he explains that all the brothers were in awe with the fighting going on between Yehuda and Yosef, and they said, we just let them fight it off themselves because they are like kings. And the question begs itself, I understand why Yosef is like a king. He was second in command. But why is Yehuda being referenced as a king by the brothers? If anything, after Yehuda's idea to sell Yosef to the Ishmaelim, Chazal tell us he was brought down from the level he was. So how can it be that right now suddenly they view him as a king? To answer this question, we really need to go to the drawing board and try to understand what is the unique characteristic about being a king. So perhaps our first glance, our first association of a king is someone that has power because he has an army and he has servants, etc. However, that's not really characteristic of a king. That's a king that's dependent on the nation, dependent on the service, has servants, dependent on other people. That king is not really a king because of himself. He's a king that is very dependent on others. That's the type of king we say, Eino melech belo am. Without a nation, you can't be a king, because it's only thanks to his servants and to the nation that he is considered as a king. Ad Kedekach, Rabbi Yisrael Misalant says, in the times that we are living in, Ikvisa de Mashiach, before Mashiach comes, it says, Chazal tell us it's going to be Pnei Hador kepnei hakelev. The generation is going to look like the dog. What does that mean? So he explains, when you see a dog carrying someone or carrying a carriage, so if you look from the outskirts, it looks like the dog is in command. Wherever he goes, the carriage that's connected to the dogs goes after them. However, how do you really know who's in command? When you get to a fork in the road, if the dog looks back to see where the owner that's in the carriage wants to go, then you see that really the person in command is the person that's sitting on the wagon. So you see, wherever the dog is facing is dependent on the person on the carriage, on the wagon. So too, in our generations, and I think this screams to all of us, if you just take even 2 seconds to listen to the news, no matter where you are, the manigim of the dog, the leaders, they always look back. They don't really do whatever they feel is right. A lot of times they zigzag all the time. Why is that? Because they look back and to see what the nation wants. And based on what the nation wants, that's what they decide is right to do. Meaning, they want to get the honor, they wouldn't want to be in charge. And the only way they can be in charge is not because they have real true ideals. Now, it could be what I'm saying is not true about everyone, but you see it a lot. You see that people don't have real ideals. Their ideals is dependent on what the nation wants because they want to be in command and they want to get the honor. So a person that's drawn by materialistic and physical things and honor, then he doesn't really do what the ideals he believes are right, but rather being dependent on others. A true king, though, he does what he believes is right. Doesn't matter how much honor he can get if he would do the wrong thing. It doesn't matter because he is in charge and he is going to do what he believes is right. That's true malchus. That's a person that really has the characteristic of a king. And where does this start? It starts within each and every one of us, not on a global nation-wise, but each person. A king is someone, the Arizal says, that we have moyach lev koved. Moyach is our mind, our brain, and that represents what we think, the way we think, the ideals. It represents true ideals. Of course, for us, ideals are based on the Heilige Torah. And then you have lev, which is emotions. Everyone has emotions. And then you have koved. Koved, the liver, represents physical drives. What is the thing that rules over your life? If it's your mind, then you're a king. And that's the acronym. Melech, Moyach, Lev, Koved. Because with your moach, you are the master of everything else, of your physical drives, of your emotional drives. And that's exactly why Chazal tell us that Talmidei Chachamim, because the Torah helps us reach this level, are also known, the Gemara says, are kings. As the Gemara in Gittin, Samech Beis Amud Beis says, Rabbanon Akru Melachim, Dichtiv Bi Melachim Im Loichu. Where do you see this in Yehuda? You see it in several places, but there's a Tosefta. The Midrash says that why was Yehuda, and we know Shevet Yehuda, the tribe of Yehuda, got Malchus. It goes to say several things. We'll just share one of them, but they all have the same theme, and that is what we're saying right now. One of them is that we know the whole episode with Tamar. He could have been quiet and not to frame himself, and she would have been burnt. But no, he said that's not the true ideal. She's right, and I have to confess. And perhaps that's also why he's called Yehuda, Lehodot, Takaras HaToiv. That is Malchus, a person that's able to appreciate, because that's an ideal, a person that is able to be moide ala emes and admit if he was wrong. That's an unbelievable level, and that screams out Malchus. The same we see by Yosef. Yosef had all kinds of nisyonos. We know Eshet Potiphar tried to seduce him, and he was able to overcome that. That again shows Malchus. And where do we see this screaming out? Chazal tell us that when the nation of Paro came up to him and said, how can you give the crown of royalty to a slave that came out of jail? How can you give it to Yosef? So Paro says, no, I can see signs of royalty with him. What are these signs? In another place, Chazal tell us a midrash that explains to us what these signs of royalty are by him. As it says, Amar Shimon ben Gamliel, Yosef deserved everything he got. Why? He didn't kiss when he was seduced to do a sin, and hence, whatever comes out of his lips, everyone will have to abide by. His body didn't touch a sin, so he got to wear royalty clothes. And so on, etc. You see, because he was in command with his mind over his emotions, over his physical drives, that is true Malchus. And that's something each and every one of us can get to. Now we can understand what we started off with. The Shvatim knew that Yehuda and Yosef reached a very high level when it comes to this characteristic we're talking about, which is royalty. True royalty is when you have such strong ideals in your mind, they are able to overcome and resist any temptations, be it emotional temptations, be it physical temptation. And that is what other Shvatim, the other brothers, saw both in Yehuda and Yosef. And mainly we understand the Pasuk in Tehillim and the Midrash that says they were in awe and they said, let them fight it off. We're not on their level from this perspective. I just want to end off with two short stories about this idea. Reb Chaim Kanievsky totally lived this way. And there's many stories about that to prove it. Just one simple one is when his Rebbitzin passed away. It was Shabbos Chol HaMoed Pesach. And because you're not allowed to mourn on Pesach, on Shabbos, you're supposed to be happy on Shabbos. So he was, even though he was really hurt, but he was able to hold that emotion. That's how much Malchus he had. He was able to master his emotions and push it off till Motzei Shabbos. The second Did Avdallah, he started burst out crying. And that's unbelievable levels of this idea of being able to control your emotions. As it says, Tzadikim libam birshusam. That tzaddikim have their hearts in their territory that they're in charge of. The same idea you saw by Rav Elyashiv Zatzal and also Ovadia Yosef Zatzal. Both of them, when they went through surgery, they wanted to be able to learn at the same time. So they were able to go through a very serious surgery without getting a general anesthetic because they knew that would affect their memories and they wouldn't be able to learn during that time. So they were able to overcome that, even though they had major pain during the time because their mind was in control. Rav Nassan Tzvi Finkel Zatzal, Rosh Yeshiva of Mir, same idea. He had Parkinson's during the later years of his life, and he preferred not to take medication because he knew that would affect his memory, even though that would make it way easier for him. No, he preferred to shake as long as his memory won't be affected by the learning. These are people that all possess this characteristic of true royalty in the eyes of Hashem, Yiratzon, that will take this idea and embed it into our lives, because that is what life is all about, to use our minds and live our life based on the ideals that we are receiving through the Heilige Torah, and live our lives based on these ideals, despite the Yetzer Hara, despite the emotional drives, and despite the physical drives. Have a good chance.
This concludes another episode of the Prism of Torah. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something valuable. If you did, please subscribe to the podcast and give a 5-star rating. You can also find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, or our own website, prismoftorah.com, where we have a full archive of all our past episodes. We would like to thank Yona Vefa for the recording equipment and Ellie Podcast Productions for handling all our post-podcast productions. Join us next week for another enlightening conversation on the Prism of Torah.